The Price of Greed. Once upon a time, there lived a fisherman with his wife in a small, humble cottage. They were as poor as church mice, and could hardly make ends meet. One morning, the fisherman woke up early and went to the sea. As usual, he cast his net into the water and murmured to himself, "I hope I will catch some nice big fish." He waited for so long that he felt his eyelids as heavy as lead. Sleep was going to take hold of him when he suddenly felt the net so heavy. He quickly summoned all his strength and pulled it hard towards him, wondering what kind of heavy fish it had. To his great surprise, there was a siren in the net. "Please let me go back to the water," said the siren entreatingly, "or else I will die." As he felt sorry for a pretty creature like her, he set the beautiful siren free. When he was back home, the fisherman told his wife the story. The latter turned angry. She blamed him for such a stupid and unforgivable mistake that only foolish people would do. "That was a rare opportunity," said the wife reproachfully, "and you were so stupid as to let it slip out of your hands." "You just can't imagine how the poor siren was bitterly entreating me to let her go," replied the fisherman. "I felt my heart break when I saw her crying." "But you could have asked her to reward you for saving her life," said the wife bitterly. In order to please his wife, the fisherman rushed back to the sea. He climbed to the top of a huge rock on the seashore and called the siren to the top of his voice. The sea became agitated for a while. Then the siren poked her head out of the water. "Who is calling me?" said she inquiringly. "It's me," answered the fisherman, waving his hand to her. "I'm here, standing on the big rock." "What can I do for you?" asked the siren. "What are you calling me for?" "My wife wants a nice house instead of the decaying cottage where we live," replied the fisherman. "That's an easy thing to do," said the siren. "I'm very thankful. I'm really very thankful," answered the fisherman, quickly taking leave of her to disclose the happy news to his wife. From a distance, the fisherman was pleasantly surprised to see a nice and large house. It was surrounded by a big garden. The garden was carpeted with blossoming colorful flowers, with drops of dew still resting on their petals. There were also huge trees, which provided a lot of shade. In the middle of the garden was a marble fountain, sprouted an umbrella-like jet of cool and refreshing water. The fisherman rubbed his eyes in disbelief and exclaimed, "My goodness, what an Eden!" A week later, the wife found the house too small and unfitting for an ambitious woman like her. As she was so desirous, she said to her husband, "The siren could have given us a bigger house. Why shouldn't you ask her to change this one into a castle?" "A castle?" echoed the fisherman in disbelief. "Yes, a castle," emphasized his wife. "I feel I don't belong here." "But the house is not small. It is in fact too big with only the two of us living in it," answered the fisherman. "I said I want a castle," insisted his wife in a childish manner. "You either go to the siren and tell her to change this house into a castle, or else I'll leave you forever." Anger and worry were visibly printed on the fisherman's face. He felt bewildered and uneasy about his unsatisfied wife. But as he was soft wax in her hands, he set for the sea and talked to the siren. "My wife is no more satisfied with the house," he said in a low voice, beads of sweat dripping from his forehead. In order to soothe his worry, the siren willingly accepted to fulfill the new wish. With wide open eyes, the fisherman stood motionless in front of a huge stone castle with a large iron gate. He was startled by its high towers and minarets on which pigeons and swallows had peacefully perched themselves. Next to the castle was a big pond. In it, many ducks were swimming joyfully. They formed beautiful circles on the water surface as they paddled with their palms. "Good heavens!" murmured the fisherman to himself as he shook his head. "Am I in a fairyland?" Shortly after, and to the fisherman's great amazement, his wife wanted to become a princess. Overwhelmed by grief, the helpless fisherman dragged his feet and headed for the sea. After a long hesitation, he managed to summon his courage and told the siren about his wife's new wish. "My wife is hard to satisfy," he bitterly said in an imploring tone. "She wants to become a princess." The siren felt pity for the helpless creature. She consolingly replied, "Go home, and you will find the princess waiting for you." The fisherman couldn't believe his eyes at seeing his wife dressed in velvet and silk. A glittering diamond crown decorated her head. A gold necklace gleamed against her neck. The castle was teeming with servants ready to carry out orders in the flickering of her fingers. The princess welcomed her husband with wide open arms and said, "How do I look, dear? Am I charming?" A flicker of smile crossed her face. "Like an angel," he answered in an uneasy, mocking tone as he expected her to be more demanding. Still unsatisfied, as the fisherman had rightly guessed, the avaricious wife cast her greed shining eyes authoritatively on him and said, "Now, I want to be queen." "A what?" replied the fisherman, looking at his wife with a frown. "Am I speaking Chinese?" replied the wife. "Or have you gone deaf? I said I want to be a queen. A queen, you know." The fisherman stood perplexed. A touch of sadness touched his face. He could not make out what was going on in his wife's mind. In spite of his distress, he returned to the siren. "My wife is certainly getting mad," he said, wiping his fleshy, red face with the back of his hand. "She is asking to become a queen." The siren looked compassionately at the good-hearted fisherman and promised to fulfill the new wish. When he went back home, the queen was proudly sitting with her guests at a large dinner table. On it were all kinds of food that one could imagine, and plates, spoons, forks, and knives, all golden. On either side of the queen stood a servant ready to attend on her. Not believing his eyes, the fisherman pinched his cheek to make sure that he was not dreaming. He then tiptoed towards his wife, whose smile stretched from one ear to the other, and whispered, "Is that you, darling?" "Who else do you think it is?" said she proudly. Hardly a week dragged by when she came out with a new wish. "I would be the happiest of all women if my dear husband consented to ask the siren to make me an empress." The fisherman's face reddened. He shrank back from his wife as he knew that her wishes would never cease. As though ghosts took hold of him, the fisherman rushed to the sea with the new wish from his greedy wife. He fearfully said to the siren, "Believe it or not, my wife wants to become an empress." No sooner had the fisherman uttered these words than the sky grew dark and the sea turned rough. A roaring thunder that shattered the sky seemed to go on forever. The waves grew higher and higher. They engulfed everything on their way. A deafening sound of shaken rocks filled the fisherman with terror. He stood trembling, his teeth chattering like a child. As soon as the storm cleared up, the fisherman found himself in an enormous luxurious castle under the sea, the walls of which were built of shells. "Welcome to the kingdom of fish," rang a nice, inviting voice to the fisherman's ears. He quickly turned around. His eyes popped out in surprise when he saw the enchanting siren sitting on a huge golden throne. "What am I doing here?" he inquired. The siren stood up and moved softly towards him. "Would you take me as a wife and become the king of all the fish in the sea?" she asked. For a moment, the fisherman was tongue-tied. He then held the siren tightly against him and let his lips print ardent kisses on her rosy cheeks. For the rest of his life, the fisherman enjoyed a happy and blissful time with the siren. One day, it came to his mind to make a journey to the land. Instead of the cozy castle where he had left his former wife, there was a small old cottage. In front of it was standing his former miserable wife, dressed in rags. She was as mad as a hatter and had tears rolling down her cheeks. But can anyone feel sorry for a greedy woman like her? The end.